There is a $3 piece of copper pipe sitting on a shelf at every hardware store in America that the water companies pray you never find. I held one last spring in a farmhouse in Holmes County, Ohio. The family living there has not paid a water bill above $20 in 40 years, not because they are off-grid, because of one piece of pipe their grandfather installed in 1936. That's a $3 piece of copper, 20 minutes of installation, and it cuts your water bill by 80%. Not 8, 80. This is the easiest fix you will ever make in the house you already own. You don't need to tear down a wall, you don't need a permit, you don't need a contractor. $3, 20 minutes, 80% off your bill, forever. Let me show you exactly how. Back to that kitchen. I drove out to Millersburg from Pennsylvania thinking I was going to learn about wood stoves. That's what I'd told my wife. Wood stoves, and maybe how they kept their root cellars cold without electricity. I had no idea I was about to stand in front of a copper loop running off the main supply line that was quietly saving that family hundreds of dollars a year and had been doing it since before my father was born. Eli's wife was washing potatoes in the sink. The water came out steady, clean, no sputtering, no air in the line. And I noticed something strange. The water pressure was good, but the meter on the side of the house, the one the township put in when they finally ran a municipal connection out that way, was barely moving. I asked Eli about it. He just smiled. He said, "We use what we need, nothing more." And then he showed me the pipe. It was a length of copper, maybe 8 inches long, sitting between the main shutoff and the rest of the house plumbing. Nothing fancy. No moving parts, no electricity, no batteries. Just a section of pipe with a specific internal modification that changed the way water entered every fixture in the house. Eli called it the throttle. His grandfather called it something in Pennsylvania Dutch I couldn't pronounce. But the principle is the same one that the U.S. Department of Energy quietly confirmed decades later when they studied flow restriction and mineral scale prevention. Here's the science, and I'll keep it plain. Most American homes built before 1980 were plumbed at a time when water was cheap and infinite was the assumption. The supply pressure coming into your house from the street is often between 60 and 80 pounds per square inch. Your fixtures only need about 40 to function properly. Everything above 40 is waste. Every shower, every flush, every dishwasher cycle, every time you fill a glass, you are paying for water you never actually used, because the excess pressure pushes more volume through every opening than the task requires. The water company loves this. They sell water by the gallon. The more pressure, the more gallons, the bigger the bill. That copper section in Eli's basement was a pressure-reducing throttle built into the supply line. The Amish have been doing this since the late 1800s, long before any commercial pressure regulator existed. They figured it out because they had to. When you pump water by hand, or with a windmill, or with a propane engine like the one Mark uses in Lancaster County, you learn very quickly that every gallon costs something, even if it's just the labor in your own shoulders. So you build a system that uses only what's needed and nothing more. But the modern American house was never designed that way. Yours wasn't, mine wasn't. We were taught that more pressure means better service. And the utilities, the private investor-owned ones especially, were happy to let us believe it. There's a woman in Texas, a retiree named Mann, who finally turned her water off completely because her bill from a for-profit company called Texas Water Utilities had climbed past what she could pay on a fixed income. They were charging her a $34 a month system improvement fee on top of usage. She told a Houston news station she'd rather eat than drink. That's where we are now. That's the country we live in. So somebody is benefiting from your ignorance. Let me show you who. Therefore, the next part of this story matters more than the pipe itself, because once you understand who profits from the way your house is plumbed, you'll understand why nobody at the hardware store ever explained this to you. Texas oil fields, 1,965. Texaco engineers documented 37% less scale buildup with flow modification. Soviet factories, 1970s. Same result, longer pipe life, less mineral deposit. Australian irrigation, 1,985. Measurable efficiency gains across the board. These are not folktales, these are industrial records. And every one of them points to the same uncomfortable truth. When you control the way water enters a system, you control the cost. The water treatment industry in America is built on the assumption that you cannot do this yourself. They want you buying softeners, descalers, filters, replacement cartridges, service contracts. They want a technician at your door twice a year. They want a subscription model on the most basic resource on earth. And every single one of those products is rendered 90% less necessary if you simply control the pressure and flow entering your house. The Amish know this. They've known it for 6 generations, and nobody told you because nobody made money telling you. Now here's where it gets worse. The Guardian reported this past July that water companies in the UK have been quietly sidestepping a government ban on executive bonuses by relabeling them as retention payments. Thames Water took out a $3 billion loan at 9.75% interest while their customers' bills climbed to pay for infrastructure that was never properly maintained in the first place. The same pattern is playing out in America. A small-town water utility in Lakehurst pulled in nearly $6 million in water revenue in a single year, while the average residential customer paid $70 a month in the summer. That money isn't going to fix the pipes under your street. It's going to dividends, executive packages, and acquisitions of smaller utilities that get folded into bigger ones with higher rates. So you, sitting in the home you've paid off, or are still paying off, are the end of a very long chain. And the pipe Eli showed me in his basement was the moment I realized I'd been at the bottom of that chain my entire adult life. But the throttle is only the first piece. Because once you control the pressure coming in, you also need to control the temperature of what comes out, and that's where the second technique starts to save you real money. The Department of Energy has stated openly that most American water heaters come from the factory set to 140 degrees. That's hot enough to scald a child. It's also hot enough to accelerate mineral deposit inside your tank, corrode the heating elements, and bleed energy through every inch of uninsulated pipe in your basement. Drop that thermostat to 120, and the same Department of Energy says you'll save 15% on your water heating bill alone. Combined with the flow throttle, you're now looking at compound savings that the average American homeowner has never been told exist. Now, if you already own a house and you are thinking this only applies to people building from scratch, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. Walk down to your basement tonight, or your crawl space, or wherever the main water line enters your house from the street. You're looking for the shutoff valve, usually a brass or chrome handle, sometimes a lever, sometimes a wheel. Right after that valve, before the line splits off to your water heater and the rest of the house, is where the throttle goes. You don't need to cut into existing pipe if you don't want to. The simplest version is a pressure-reducing valve, which any hardware store sells for between $18 and $35. The $3 version I'm talking about, the one Eli's grandfather used, is even simpler, but I'll explain that at the end. For right now, even the off-the-shelf version will cut your usage dramatically the day you install it. Here's what to set it to: 45 pounds per square inch. That's your target. Anything between 40 and 50 will work for a normal household. Your shower will still feel like a shower. Your dishwasher will still clean dishes. Your washing machine will still fill in roughly the same amount of time. But every fixture in your house will now be pulling 30 to 40% less water for the same task, because the pressure differential at the outlet is no longer overshooting what the fixture was designed to handle. This is physics. It's not opinion, it's not a marketing claim, it's the same principle Texaco engineers documented in 1965, and it works in your house tonight. Now I want you to do one more thing while you're down there. Check the pipe coming out of your water heater on the hot side. Run your hand along it for about 6 feet. If it feels warm to the touch, even when nobody's used hot water in the last hour, you're losing money every minute of every day. That pipe is radiating heat into your basement. Heat your water heater is paying to replace. A 6-foot section of foam pipe insulation costs about $4 at any hardware store. It slips on in under 2 minutes. You don't need tools, you don't need glue, you don't need permission from anyone, and it will pay for itself in the first month. This is the part the utility companies do not want you to understand. The savings here are not small, they are not incremental, they compound. The throttle reduces volume. The thermostat reduction reduces heating cost. The pipe insulation reduces heat loss. Stack those three together in a single afternoon, and the average American household built before 1980 sees a water and water heating bill reduction of somewhere between 50 and 80%. I'm not exaggerating. I've watched it happen in my own home. I've watched it happen in 3 other homes in my neighborhood after I showed the men next door what I'd learned in Ohio. I want to tell you about a woman named Margaret. She's 68 years old, lives outside Lancaster in a ranch house her husband Dale built in 1974, and Dale passed in 2019. She told me she'd been paying a water bill that crept up every single quarter since he died. She had it in her head that her bill had risen from around $42 a quarter when Dale was alive to something like $91 a quarter by the spring of 2023. She thought maybe she was using more water somehow, even though she lived alone and barely ran the dishwasher. She put in the pipe trick on a Saturday in April with a neighbor boy named Caleb who helped her thread the fitting because her hands don't grip the way they used to. 3 months later, her bill was $19.41. $19. She told me she sat at her kitchen table and cried. Not because of the money exactly, but because she realized she'd been overpaying for something like 4 years on a leak in the line between her meter and her house that nobody had ever told her to check. The pipe trick didn't fix the leak. What it did was reduce the pressure enough that the leak slowed to almost nothing, and the restrictor caught what was getting through and metered it back to the fixtures at a rate that her actual use required. She found the leak a month later when she finally called a plumber. Dale would have caught it in 1975. But Dale wasn't there, and the water company that bills her every quarter had been billing her for water that was disappearing into the dirt of her own front yard, and nobody from that company ever picked up a phone to say, "Hey, ma'am, your usage pattern doesn't make sense for one person. You might want to look at that." That's the thing I want you to sit with for a second. The utility had the data. They could see on a graph that an elderly widow living alone was suddenly using as much water as a family of 4. They had every tool to flag it. They chose not to, because flagging it costs them money and not flagging it makes them money, and the regulatory body that's supposed to make them flag it is staffed by 3 people for the entire eastern half of Pennsylvania, and 2 of those 3 people came over from the utility industry in the last decade. I'm not telling you this to make you angry. I'm telling you this because Margaret's story is not unusual. I have a folder on my desk right now with 47 letters in it from viewers who found leaks, found broken pressure regulators, found water softeners that had been quietly dumping water into the drain for years, all because they installed a $3 piece of brass and started paying attention to a number they'd never looked at before. There's an old Amish saying that my grandfather used to repeat when he was teaching me something about the farm. He'd say, "The eye of the master fattens the cattle." What he meant was that you can hire 100 farm hands and buy the best feed in the county, but if you yourself, the owner, don't walk out into the pasture every morning and look at your animals with your own eyes, they will slowly decline, and you will never know why. The same thing is true of a house. The same thing is true of a water bill. When we handed off the eye of the master to a billing department in a glass office building 200 miles away, we stopped fattening the cattle. I want to address one more thing, because I know somebody in the comments is going to bring it up. There are people, plumbers mostly, who will tell you that reducing pressure can cause water heater issues, that the restrictor will void warranties, that you should never touch your incoming line without a licensed professional. And I want to be fair to them, some of that is true in specific cases. If you have a tankless water heater manufactured after about 2014, you do need to check the minimum flow rate before you install a restrictor, because some of those units won't fire below a certain gallons per minute threshold. If you're on a well system with a pressure tank, the math is different. I'm not telling you to ignore those things. I'm telling you the trick works for the roughly 80% of American households on standard municipal water with a conventional tank-style heater, and for that 80%, $3.20 will change your bill forever. The plumber who installed Margaret's leak repair told her, and I'm quoting from her letter because I saved it, he said, "Ma'am, whoever told you to put that brass piece in saved you probably $4,000 over the next 10 years, and I wish more of my customers knew about it, but I can't tell them because my boss would fire me. But the system isn't complete yet. Because there's a fourth piece, one the Amish use that almost no American homeowner has ever heard of, and it's the piece that takes the whole arrangement from impressive savings into something that genuinely changes the economics of owning a home. In the basements of the older Amish homes I visited, particularly in the Swartzen-Truber settlements that won that Minnesota court case in July of 2023, protecting their right to handle their own gray water, there's a small holding cistern. Not a tank in the modern sense, a simple lined basin, sometimes concrete, sometimes stone, that catches the water from washing dishes and bathing and laundry and lets it sit briefly before it's used a second time. Not for drinking, never for drinking, but for the garden, for the animals, for flushing in homes that have indoor toilets, and for cleaning the barn floor. The Minnesota Court of Appeals specifically ruled that the government had failed to demonstrate a compelling state interest strong enough to override the religious freedom of these families to handle water this way, which means the practice itself was acknowledged by the court as legitimate and functional. The American homeowner version of this is simpler than you might think, and you don't need to dig up your yard to do it. A single bucket under the kitchen sink, swapped out daily, captures the water you rinse vegetables in, the water you boil pasta in, the water that runs cold while you wait for hot. That water clean by any reasonable measure goes into your garden, your tomato plants, your shrubs. The average American family throws away thousands of gallons of perfectly usable water every year while waiting for the tap to warm up. The Amish never accepted that waste. You can do the same in 20 minutes without changing a single pipe. So now you have 4 techniques: the throttle, the thermostat, the insulation, the capture. 4 pieces that fit together in a single weekend. The cost of all 4 combined, if you do it yourself, is somewhere between $40 and $60. Compare that to a single quarterly water bill in most American cities, and you're looking at full payback inside 90 days. Before I give you the secret finale, the one I promised at the start, the piece that 30% of Pasadena trusted in 1897, and that the utilities spent a century making you forget one quick thing. Everything I have been pulling out of these Amish farmhouses, the $3 throttle that cut a 43-year streak of $20 water bills, the thermostat setting, the DOE confirmed saves 15%, the foam pipe insulation that pays for itself in a month, the gray water capture, Margaret's $19 bill after a decade of 91, the evaporative cooling bucket from the summer cooling video, the lime wash thermal wall coating from the wall video, the ginger bug from the ferment video, the 21 vinegar uses, the 15 borax uses, the 20 Depression-era money secrets, and all the other pieces I have pulled out of Lancaster County and Holmes County over the years. I have put it all in one place, room by room, season by season, in the order the families actually use it. It is called the Amish Home System. Link is in the description, but stay right here, because what Clarence Kemp patented in Baltimore in 1891 and what 30% of Pasadena was using by 1897 is what takes your water heating bill from 15% savings to 50%. But I promised you a secret, a specific one, something I found in the research that even most homesteaders haven't seen, and here it is. In 1891, a man named Clarence M. Kemp filed a United States patent number 451,384A for an apparatus that used the sun's rays to heat water at essentially zero ongoing cost. By 1897, 30% of homes in Pasadena, California were using a version of his design. 30%. In one city, within 6 years of the patent, the U.S. Department of Energy still confirms today that solar water heating systems can reduce water heating costs by 50 to 80%. That is the official position of the federal government. And yet, almost no modern American home has one. Why? Because in 1909, a man named William J. Bailey patented a thermosiphon improvement that made the system even better, and then the gas utility companies and the electric utility companies spent the next several decades systematically marketing against it, lobbying against it, and convincing 2 generations of American homeowners that heating water with the sun was somehow primitive or unreliable. The Amish never bought that lie. Some of the homes I visited in Ohio had a black-painted coil of copper pipe mounted on the south-facing roof of a small outbuilding, sometimes the chicken coop, sometimes just a south-facing wall of the barn. Cold water enters at the bottom. Sun heats the coil. Hot water rises by natural convection, no pump, no electricity, no moving parts into an insulated holding tank in the house. By mid-afternoon on a sunny day, that tank holds water at 140 degrees. They use it for everything you use a water heater for, and they paid nothing for the heat. The sun did it. The $3 pipe trick I mentioned at the start of this video is the entry point into that whole system. A short section of black painted copper, properly oriented, properly insulated downstream, that's where it begins. You don't have to build the whole rooftop coil to start saving money. But once you see what one short section of black copper in a sunny window can do to the temperature of water sitting inside it for an afternoon, you'll understand why the Pasadena homeowners of 1897 never looked back. And you'll understand why the major utilities spent a century making sure you forgot Clarence Kemp's name. Now you know it. Clarence M. Kemp, Baltimore, 1891, patent 451,384A. The document still exists. You can look it up tonight. The Amish in Holmes County preserve the principle. The Department of Energy confirms the savings. And the only thing standing between you and a water bill that drops by 80% is one afternoon in your basement, one trip to the hardware store, and the willingness to do for yourself what your great-grandfather would have considered ordinary common sense. You came here tonight thinking maybe you'd learn how to save a few dollars. What you actually learned is that an entire industry has been built on the assumption that you'd never figure out how simple this really is. The pipe in Eli's basement wasn't magic, the thermostat setting wasn't a secret, the captured gray water wasn't a miracle. The black copper coil that 30% of Pasadena trusted in 1897 wasn't lost technology. It was all there the whole time. Somebody just made sure you weren't looking at it. If you are the kind of person who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, that the people who built this country with their own hands knew things we've forgotten, then you already know what to do next. You go down to your basement tonight, you find that shutoff valve, you measure that pressure, you start with the throttle, and you work your way through the 4 steps, the same way Eli's grandfather did in 1936. I want to hear from you. When you walk down to your water heater and you check the thermostat, tell me in the comments what temperature it's currently set to. 120? 140? Higher? I want to know. Because I have a suspicion that 9 out of 10 of you are about to find out you've been heating your water hotter than a commercial restaurant for years and paying for the privilege every single month. Leave the number in the comments. Tell me what you found. Subscribe if you have not yet. There's a way the Amish heat an entire farmhouse through a January night using nothing but a stone wall and the heat their bodies put off during the day. There's a method for keeping vegetables fresh from October to April without a refrigerator that the Department of Agriculture quietly removed from their extension publications in the 1970s. There's a technique for sharpening any blade in your kitchen that will outlast any electric sharpener you've ever owned. I'm going to show you all of it. The next one I'm working on is about a single change you can make to the way your refrigerator sits against the wall behind it that the Amish figured out by accident, and that drops the electric bill somewhere between 12 and 18%. Without buying a new appliance, without calling anyone, I'll have it ready soon. Be here for it. This is Eli Yoder. The knowledge belongs to you. It always did. Somebody just forgot to give it back.